This podcast is sponsored by the valleygivesback.org.
For hundreds of years we brought you the news.
Hello, everybody. Welcome to Navel Gazing, the Valley Indie podcast. My name is Eugene Driscoll of valleyindie.org. That is a nonprofit online newspaper. Wish I had a cough button. Covering Ansonia, Derby, and Seymour in the great state of Connecticut. Connecticut's lower Naugatuck Valley. So, all right. This broadcast is going to be audio from the December 16th Derby Board of Education meeting. During that meeting, Jim Gilday, the chairman of the Derby Board of Education, gave an update to the full board on the work of the Temporary Regional School Study Committee. That is a group of 10 appointed residents, 5 from Ansonia, 5 from Derby, who have been studying since 2018 the pros and cons of possibly regionalizing Derby and Ansonia schools. Jim Gilday is the chairman of the Board of Ed. He is also the co-chair representing the Derby delegation on the Ansonia Derby School Regionalization Committee. Now, this is a complicated topic. I'm almost afraid to discuss it at length for fear of not getting something 100% right. But basically, last time this committee met was back October, late October, right before the most recent election. And from what's been relayed and conversations I've had on and off the record, they hit an impasse, the two sides, about which way to go in terms of regionalization. There are two sort of proposals on the table, two trains of thought since this thing started in 2018, and one would have a 4 elementary school system. The other would have 3 elementary schools. In either scenario, Derby High School is mothballed, from what I understand. Now, Derby, well, no, I'm getting ahead of myself. There was supposed to be a meeting earlier this month of the School Regionalization Committee. It was canceled because the agenda wasn't posted in time. So it's been rescheduled for December 28th, but I'm not certain it's going to take place due to the holiday. It is on a calendar, but I don't know if it's going forward yet. So check back next week to the Derby city calendar and the Ansonia city calendar. And there's no way to talk about this without first giving a 10-minute introduction. But anyway, right before that last meeting that ended up not taking place, the Ansonia delegation, according to an email from Joseph Yauman, who's an Ansonia alderman and the co-chair of the Ansonia Derby School Regionalization Committee with Gilday. Yauman is sort of the head of the Ansonia side of this. He sent an email with a proposed resolution he wanted, or the Ansonia delegation wanted, the 10-member committee to vote upon. I don't want to say it set off a firestorm on the Derby side, but it definitely caused a reaction. Again, I'm trying to just stick with words that aren't explosive. It definitely caused a reaction from the Derby side and prompted it to be discussed at the Derby Board of Education meeting on December 16th. And basically, according to Jim Gilday, the Ansonia proposal would only benefit Ansonia. It would close the Irving School, which really seems to be a point of contention among the Derby quote-unquote side. In fact, a change.org petition was started after this meeting by an Irving School teacher or an educator of some kind from Ansonia opposing this. It's called Oppose Ansonia Delegation's Resolution for Establishing a Framework for Merger. It's got 181 signatures on it. And basically, Derby is worried that if they mothball the Irving School, it could be blight eventually and won't be a good thing for the neighborhood. And the Ansonia side, from what I understand, is saying, let's put something out to the people. We've been working on this for 4 years now. Let the people decide what they want to do with Ansonia Derby School Regionalization. You're going to hear the Derby side throughout this discussion. It goes on for about 20 minutes or so. But the Connecticut Post reported on this issue over the weekend. In a story published December 17th, Joseph Yauman again, the co-chair representing the Ansonia delegation and an Ansonia alderman, said that, quote, "I think there are pathways that make it feasible. It's just going to take compromise from both sides. And we haven't gotten to that point where it seems like that's going to occur." Yauman is quoted as saying in the Connecticut Post. So, and before I get to, again, the recording, I just wanted to read, I posted this last week, excuse me, on Valley Indy Facebook. I sort of did a little preliminary thing because there's been a lot going on. I haven't been able to sit down and write a story. But I noted that school merger discussions between Ansonia and Derby definitely took a turn this month, where you have open opposition, public opposition to what Ansonia is trying to do from the Derby side. That's a change. That is definitely the new in the news. Jim Gilday had posted on Twitter, and then I screenshot it and put it on the Valley Indy Facebook page. Gilday said Ansonia's, quote, "resolution for establishing a framework for merger," again, that was a proposal they were going to vote on earlier this month, "creates a district that, according to Gilday, closes the Irving School, limits Derby's vocal voice and BOE representation, eliminates Derby's financial savings to offset Ansonia's losses." So in reaction to that, Nancy Marini, who is a prominent, I'll describe as a prominent Ansonia Republican, she is in touch and researches issues and presents them from an Ansonia side. She asks on Facebook, what is the long-term sustainability for either school system without regionalization? The state underfunds Ansonia and Derby schools each year. Because of this, the taxpayers each year need to ensure that teachers get their contracted raises and that the increased cost of educating children can be met without decreasing the quality of education. This means that each year taxpayers need to come up with at least $1 million more than the year before. Can Derby or Ansonia continue to provide a better education without regionalization? Being able to continue to quote unquote meet minimum standards and cutting programs isn't viable. Our communities need to think outside the box and do what's best for our school kids. It's past time that the voters get to decide if they want regionalization. So, like I've said several times, the Ansonia delegation put forth this proposed resolution that the way the process is, the school regionalization committee could then recommend that to the legislative bodies in each town, and it could go out to voters. Anything that goes out that clears all the hurdles that have to be cleared has to be approved by communities, by both communities, by voters in both communities. So I guess the bottom line is, if you haven't been paying attention to the Ansonia Derby Regionalization Committee the last 4 years, now is the time to pay attention. They're heading into the final lap. Things are getting interesting. And I'd like to play a message from our sponsor. This podcast is sponsored by valleygivesback.org. It shouldn't be a surprise that when you pass away, none of your assets go with you. Whether you have a will or not, your assets will be distributed. Sometimes not how you would like. Why not make a plan? Your plan can include your favorite relatives, friends, and maybe a nonprofit or two supporting causes that you care about. Ask a trusted advisor about plan giving options. Plan for a gift that keeps on giving. Learn more at valleygivesback.org. So the last thing I'll say before I play the play the audio from last week's meeting is actually, I don't even remember what I was going to say. So maybe that's a sign from God to shut up. I wish everybody a Merry Christmas and Happy New Year and Happy Holidays. On a programming note, I am trying desperately to take some time off. I usually shut down valleyindy.org for 5 days once a year, especially since I'm the only full-time employee at this point. I haven't had a chance to do that, I think, since August 2020, when I went upstate with my upstate New York with my son for a couple of days. So I have that coming. All right, so here is, I know what I wanted to say. You're going to hear the audio right now. I don't know, it's 20 minutes or so. It is slightly edited. I watched on Zoom. I recorded the audio from Zoom. Sometimes it's hard to hear 98% of it is fine. but some of it's hard to hear if a member didn't turn on their mic or whatever setup Derby uses. I'm not 100% sure. Particularly, I had to cut out, and I'm sorry to do that, but it was just, you just couldn't understand what was being said. School board member George Kritika. You're going to hear Jim Gilday say, George, did you want to say something? George probably spoke for 5 minutes, but it was going in and out, in and out, in and out, and there was a loud-pitched, high-pitched hum. So I cut that part out because there's no way, you literally could not hear anything. So just for the record, that part was edited out because there was a technical issue with the Zoom on the Derby BOE's end. So that being said, without further ado, which has been further, here's the Derby School Board.
I think Oni mentioned that, just moving forward, and I just thought it was fair for this board to get an update, a little more substantial one. Although I do feel like George and myself and Tara, when she was here, gave a monthly update. I just want to say and preface all my comments by the first report is where I felt we were after October 26th. And that was our last meeting. I will tell you on October 26th that there had been some areas of agreement at that time and some areas of disagreement. As you go through the report, I'm not going to read it all to you. You have it there in front of you. But I will tell you that in the first area, regionalization, we really came down to a pre-K through 12 model, either a 4 elementary school or a 3 elementary school. At some point, as of 10/26, I will tell you that we had some stalemate on whether it should be a 4-school model, which was Mead School, Prendergast School, Irving School, and Bradley School, or a 3-school, which would be Mead, Prendergast, closing Irving, and adding on to Bradley. And I'll be fair to really, as impartial as I can be, is that there is an annual savings by closing Irving School. There was approximately about $150,000 to $180,000 annual savings with some administrative costs, some heat, some electricity. And Ansonia, and again, that delegation tended to favor the $180,000 savings. There was the Derby side, again, at the time, had some concerns with the neighborhood school, the concerns of closing Irving School. We talked about the school on Peck Street. This is the last elementary school that had been closed in the Valley. And you could see the devastation, what it had done to the neighborhood. So Derby, I would tell you at the time, had some concern with closing Irving School. We had put about $3 million into the building. Our thought was, gee whiz, it'd be like putting a renovation on your house and then closing your house down and moving and boarding it up. So we had some concerns with that. And then we also had some concerns that our enrollment projections are definitely trending higher than what Malone and McBroom had given us, factual data that our enrollment had been projecting higher. And then really, they did not really take into account Trolley Point, Cedar Village, the apartments that are going on 33 Elizabeth Street. And so some of us thought that at the time, and again, it kind of boiled down to Derby versus Ansonia, that for $180,000, that was a nice insurance policy to have. So there was some stalemate there. Moving through the report, we did talk about academics, and for the most part, the committee came to consensus on a program of studies. We then moved on to the finance piece, and we did get about a 97.5% reimbursement rate through working through our legislators. That was in the implementer bill. Previously, it had been written that, new schools in a new regionalized school district would get like a 20% bonus, taking our regionalization percentage up. Be that as it may, Derby would still need to spend anywhere from $1.5 to $2.5 million to enter regionalization, because some of those costs are not reimbursed at the 97% rate. So there could potentially be a $2.5 million cost to Derby, which is why another reason why when we get to the savings, that was somewhat important. So the other thing that we kind of, I'll do the savings now since we're on it. So that $2.5 million cost potentially to the city of Derby is a real cost. You have to upgrade your schools. You have to change the water fountain heights. You have to change the door handles to make sure they're ADA compliant. You have to do a certain amount of work to your schools once you get into them. So that's where that $2.5 million comes to. So Derby, but the good news for Derby is because we had spent about $2,000 more per pupil than Ansonia. our savings was pretty significant in a regionalized school district. We would save about $2.5 million a year for the next 3 years, which would help offset that $2.5 million. And that was important to the Derby delegation. Ansonia, rightfully so, they were going to lose $800,000. They wanted to be made whole. They don't want to lose money. So that was another stalemate. Some people had talked about, well, gee whiz, it's paper savings, but I think the Derby side felt like, hey, that's like the IRS saying, hey, you never really got your economic stimulus, so we're going to take it back. You'd be like, oh my God, what do you mean you're going to take back my economic stimulus? Well, you never got it. It's paper money. It doesn't count, right? I mean, so each one of us, I think, would agree that would not be favorable to us. So the Derby side was pretty, didn't really look at it like, gee whiz, it's paper money. So then we moved to the governance piece, and Ansonia would have a 64% split. And so a 36% split. So the Board of Education would be apportioned about the same. Oh, no, have to be the same. So we explored a crossover vote. What the crossover vote would say is, hey, for anything to pass, you would need at least one member from both towns to pass that. The Derby side at the time had wanted unfettered crossover for any issue, because hiring a first grade teacher is just as important as hiring an administrator. And the Derby contingent side, there's no, hey, gee whiz, it's only an HR person, or hey, it's only a first grade teacher. We didn't feel that way. We felt each position is important. Adding a curriculum piece is important. Taking away a class is important. So the Derby side at the time was pretty adamant that there should be a crossover vote for everything. And Sony wanted to limit that crossover vote to just big ticket items, the major items, hiring an administrator, perhaps, or hiring a superintendent, or budget issues. And again, the Derby position was hiring a first grade teacher is just as important as an administrator. So we had some kind of impasse there. And then Ansonia also wanted to end it after 4 years. Once that 4 years was over, there was no crossover vote. It's just a weighted vote. They have 64% of the vote. And the Derby side, had some level of concern, about how that might play out and the voice we may lose. And I will just say some of the things I read online from the, certainly, I will just say makes that point valid. I heard some of the comments of people thinking they know what's best for us. I heard somebody say, Derby better do this, so kind of reemphasizing the point of the things that I read from Ansonia today reemphasize exactly why Derby wanted the crossover vote. Hey, you should do this. This makes the most sense. We're telling you this is best. And if you don't do this, you better have a backup plan. I mean, already kind of shown us how this relationship would work. So Derby had some level of concern with the crossover vote and for the length of it. And that's kind of where I think we stood, the Derby contingency had some kind of passion around Irving School. I think you saw Miss Lavelle crying today. I think some of us had the same passion. I think we had some level of concern about the governance, which I think we've seen some evidence of why we were concerned today. I think we had some concern about giving up our savings. And when you realize that you have to spend about $2.5 million anyway, and we have a boatload of money in Irving School that we're going to continue to have to pay, I think that money was, that was important to us. So I'll get into the framework for the merger but before I do that, any questions on the report that's in your packet?
Just one question, Chairman. Was there about this middle school not having a permanent CO?
That has not come up. That's a good point. That has not come up.
And secondly, the CO.
Certificate of occupancy. Here.
There's no permanent one yet.
That has not come up, sir.
Okay. Yeah. And secondly, was there any discussion with the Derby contingency about Derby High School? What would happen at Derby High School?
No. And and that's one thing that I think Tara actually mentioned today is that would also be a school that would be closed. There had not really been, we had some, hey, would it become an advanced manufacturing center? But the committee really felt that the advanced manufacturing center should be at the high school that it would be at. So at this point, there'd been no plans for high school, sir. That would kind of be boarded up as well. All right, so if there's no questions there, I'm going to move on to and I can only be as honest as I could be. The Wednesday before I was supposed to post the agenda. No, the Thursday, I think. Ansonia gave the Ansonia delegation, and again, that's just how the email was worded to me. Here's a resolution establishing a framework for a merger for the regionalization of the Ansonia and Derby Public Schools was given to me and kind of last minute. I was a little surprised. I mean, we hadn't met since 10/26, and it would be my preference, I think all of our preference, to do this stuff and to have people involved and to listen to what people have to say, and to kind of hear from our communities because I think I would like to think that every member of the temporary regional school study committee would want to have some kind of idea of what the people they represent want, because at the end of the day, our charge and our only charge, thank you, is per the statute. I mean, the very first thing the statute says is our charge is to decide whether or not regionalization, we're supposed to study the advisability. Now, I will tell you that, as an individual member, plus $15,000 to go to referendum, and I'd like to think I'm a steward of the taxpayers' money. And if the committee our charge was to determine if it was advisable. So I do think that I'd like to think each of the 5 members from both towns would want to hear from their townsfolk to see if to have their input. So I think it was kind of a blessing in disguise that meeting didn't work out. Well, I haven't gotten there, but we could. Can I just talk about the framework, and then we can definitely hear you. I'll definitely answer that. So the framework of the merger, which was to take it out to the town, does 3 things really. Word for it, and again, it's here. I don't need to read each word of it, but it does say that there would be a 9 through 12 high school, there would be a 6 to 8 middle school, and there would be 3 K through 5 level schools, 2 elementary facilities in Ansonia and 1 in Derby. It does say the resolution say that the merged district shall be governed by a 10-member board with members serving 4-year rotating terms. There will be a crossover vote for. There'll be a crossover vote that would be resolved after 4 years. And then it says each school system would start the new year with exactly what they spent the previous year, which means there would be no savings. So I will tell you that just as my own personal opinion, I remember once Barack Obama, when he was president, they said, "Hey, they tell me I compromised too much. They wanted to meet in Philadelphia. I wanted to meet in Washington, so we're meeting in Philadelphia." And my point to that is there's no compromise here. Everything in this merger is exactly when we had our stalemate. It was proposed by Ansonia. We accept that everything here is to the detriment of Derby. We close the school. We potentially devastate a neighborhood. We have no financial savings. We have to spend $2.5 million. We have to eat the money that we put in Irving School. And after 4 years, we have 36% say. So I just wanted to put that merger out there. Then Ken, I would answer your question. I'm sorry.
We just asked, speaking, people online have asked them to turn the mic back on for anybody who can speak.
What I had said earlier is, why not just let the people decide, and then it's finished one way or the other, and move on from there. The other thing I want to ask is, I think I only attended one meeting, but I never seemed to hear anything positive about the positive things that could happen with education and athletics. Was that ever discussed by this committee?
No, not athletics so much. No.
How about academics?
We did the full program of studies. Yes.
And was it proved to be beneficial?
I will tell you, really, the only concrete thing that came out from an academic, there's definitely some classes that each school would be able to take advantage of. However, we were adding no additional teachers. So I'm going to make this up, if there were 62 kids who wanted Mandarin, it didn't mean everybody. We can't guarantee in this report that everybody's going to get additional classes. No, there will be additional classes that could be offered at the high school, but without adding any teachers and adding cost, there would be no guarantee that kids could take those. As soon as those classes filled up, they would be filled. And so to answer your question, I guess about going to referendum, letting people decide, I don't discount that is an option. I just don't think it should be an option that's so blatantly bad for Derby. That's just my own personal opinion. Did you have a question?
Thank you.
Wasn't on the whole time. So you met as a committee for months,
Yes.
years.
3.5 years.
And the original reason for getting together was to.
And even before that,
This has been going on forever, right? The original reason for meeting and getting together was to make things better for the students in both towns.
Yes.
Okay. As what they've submitted to us, it clearly shortchanges Derby. And if we put this out to the community, they're going to vote on what they assume it means. And they're not necessarily going to understand what it actually means. And that scares me for the people, because they're going to vote on, everyone assumes, put it together, bigger's better. And
well,
in this instance,
I think they're going to have, aren't they going to have city, what do you call them? What do you call those city meetings?
For public hearings.
it
But
doesn't
they're gonna have
mean
public hearings.
people will understand and read it and really understand what this means for the kids in this town. And that scares me. And I did this for the greater good in making sure that I had a presence, in making sure that decisions were made and we weighed in on what was right. And as this stands, there is nothing in here that helps this town. They handed us a pile of, I don't know what, and expect us to say okay to this. And I don't know what, if we say no, where does that leave us? Are we out of talks to combine on anything? Could we share services? Could we do something else besides completely merge, so that we get some either better offerings? I understand there's some academic instances in here where we might get to send kids to the other school for Mandarin or whatever it might be. Can we do something like that versus
Well, there is another
completely-
co-op system which
Okay,
keeps the boards in place.
okay,
You know, Derby keeps their board of ed, they keep their,
okay.
but they call it a co-op, but it's still a merging of the schools. We visited once, what were the schools we visited?
You're down in East Line.
East Lyme and another town do it. And they built a new school and they were very happy with it when we went there. But that's another option, which I don't think they discussed.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely. Yeah, I to Ken's point into your question, I do sincerely believe that there's absolutely ways you could save money without closing down a school, without giving up your savings, and without losing your voice. We can still share cafeteria service, business services, HR services, transportation services, business services, classes. There's no, that is still all very possible. Yeah, that's definitely possible. Good. Any other questions?
So how much money would Ansonia benefit from this merger over us? Like, I'm assuming the only reason to do this is money. I mean, for this town.
Well, they would break even. Well, for them, they would break even in the first 3 years. Maybe somewhere in year 5, they would save money. But more importantly for them, they give nothing up. They keep all the same schools that they have. They upgrade all their schools. So they get to upgrade all their schools. They get to they get to address their middle school situation. Let's not face it. If they don't do this, they save probably $30 million on building a middle school. So certainly the advantages for Ansonia are significantly greater than ours. We house all our kids. We're fine. They have a whole middle school population that they have to do something with. That middle school on Howard Street is certainly reached the end of their life. They've actually already reached out to prior to running parallel to this. They've actually reached out to the state of Connecticut to see what they can do about their middle school. So clearly their benefits outweigh ours by doing this. And again, this school cost us $30 million, right? $28 million, 14 years ago. This same school now for them, $40 million. So for them, it gets them out of spending $40 million.
Mr. Chairman, were there any discussions on teacher salaries?
We would have to negotiate those. It's conceivable that some of our teachers would, listen, here's what concerns me, right? Their union is bigger than our union. So I think it's so that would all have to be renegotiated. But again, they have about 30% more teachers than us. So, that'd be, I don't know what would happen with teacher salaries or RIF for teacher locations or where people would go. Any other question? So, George, you want to say something?
Well, my view was, that we have the public hearings, that these people know, have as many as we want. There's money in the budget from the state that we have to have public hearings set aside, correct? Right. It's in the DMG. So now you got to remember that the company that we hired, DMG, they come up with this plan. 3 schools, 4 schools, no schools, keep everything. This is their plan. There were 7 options on the from DMG. This is one of them. Not to merge, nobody. Maybe the elementary schools and the kindergarten and just the middle school and just the high school. So there were 7 plans that DMG came out with. It just so happens that plan number 7 was K through 12, which would have been the bigger savings in both towns, both cities. So, I mean, this has been going on for 40 years. 1991, when God rest his soul, Gino DeMora was the mayor. I was on the regional committee, and we met in Seymour. It was Shelton. It was a combination of regionalized Seymour, Ansonia, Derby, and Shelton. Right? Seymour and Shelton have the high schools. Derby and Ansonia have the middle schools. Everybody keeps the elementary schools. That was a plan in 1991. Until it came to who's going to be the superintendent, who's going to coach the football team, and what color are the uniforms. Yeah, so that was it. It didn't go through. We never brought it out to the
Was there any reason why your committee didn't, maybe they should have had these public hearings as you went along? Because people aren't going to come to your meeting and do it in, public session.
Right.
It probably would have been better to have public hearing as you went along, rather than have, now if you do it, in one public hearing and have to have so much to explain at one hearing, it's going to be tough.
That's how it went the first time.
Yeah.
It didn't go very
Yeah.
well.
No, it didn't go very well with the.
You should have had public hearings as you
Well,
went along.
What I would say is that, so we have probably another month, I don't know if we get together on the 28th before. So I just wanted to put the facts out there for everyone. I don't know if the board wants to endorse the merger, oppose the merger. I don't know if there's any official position the board wants to take.
I don't think we should do either.
Oh, I think as Board of Education, if somebody wanted to, but I'm okay with it.
I mean, you could do it individually if you want, but
As it stands, I don't like it. I understand that something may need to happen, but as it stands, this doesn't help Derby.
So does somebody want to either make a motion in favor of or against? A motion to for the Derby Board of Education to oppose the resolution establish framework for mergers. Is there a second?
I second.
Second, Melissa Kanata. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
I'm going to abstain because we're on the committee, Jim. I don't think we should vote either way.
I feel comfortable voting, but I appreciate you abstaining. All those opposed? Okay, let the motion, let the record reflect.
I'll abstain too.
Let's record reflect that the motion carries unanimously 6-0 with 3 abstentions. Thank you.
For hundreds of years we've brought you the news. For the info we gave you the clues. Owners' profits were always sky high. Changing market now threatens our lives. Post-literation, critical reading, dumbed down nation, signs of inbreeding, TV sucking ideas from our head, public discourse just about dead, we'll ride the dinosaur.